If you're not talking, please mute. I can hear screen doors.
One, two, one, two.
And.
Hi, good evening. I'm Kiana Gregory, Political Director with Black Futures Lab. We are so excited that you all are joining us tonight for Sounds of the Diaspora. We have a really exciting evening planned for you, and we sincerely hope you enjoy it. I'm going to pass to our language services to give you some orientation around how we're presenting tonight, and then we'll jump in. Thanks for coming.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es María Angélica, mis pronombres son ella, ellex, y hoy estoy proveyendo interpretación en español con MARP Language Services. El propósito del ofrecer interpretación es asegurarnos que todos tengamos acceso a la información que va a ser compartida hoy en el idioma que prefiramos y que también podamos participar en el idioma en el que nos sentamos cómodas. Entonces, si usted desea utilizar nuestros servicios de interpretación hoy, va a tener dos formas. Si está en Facebook Live, puede llamar al número de teléfono 305-707-5958 para escuchar este programa en español. Y si está en el Zoom, Puede mirar en la parte de abajo de su pantalla. En unos momentos va a aparecer un pequeño globo que dice interpretación, le hace clic y elige el idioma en español. Muchas gracias. Good afternoon, my name is Maria Angelica, my pronouns are she and they, and today I will be providing Spanish interpretation with MARB Language Services. The purpose for offering interpretation is to ensure that we all have access to the information that is going to be shared today in the language in which we prefer, and also that we can participate in the language that we feel most comfortable participating in. So today, if you would like to receive this information in Spanish, you can call the number 305-707-5958. And if you are in the Zoom, at the bottom part of the screen, after we are done with the interpretation introduction, you are going to see a little globe at the bottom right that says interpretation, and you choose the language in which you want to listen to this program. And also present, we have Rose, who will be providing Creole interpretation services, and she will also introduce herself. Thank you very much.
Allô, donc bonsoir tout le monde. Moi, c'est Rose. Moi, je représente MARB Language Services avec collègue moi, Marianne Angelica. Et donc, nous souhaitons une bienvenue à Soya et dans la présentation ça. Donc, nous allons faire interprétation en espagnol et en créole. Si que, la raison qui fait que nous faisons et nous baillons et service ça, c'est parce que nous aimons que tout le monde est capable de participer dans la langue maman papa yo, ou du moins c'est la langue qui est plus confortable avec l'IA, qui ont été intéressés à participer. Et donc, si toutefois que vous avez entendu toute conversation yo, en créole, nous demandons ou vous avez sur notre téléphone, ou vous avez relé dans le numéro ça, 305 928 7611. Donc, 305 928 76 11. Et donc, si que toutefois ou dans Zoom, nous demandons que l'entrée dans Zoom, ou après un petit écran en bas, une petite fenêtre qui paraît en bas sur l'écran qui écrit anglais, français. Comme dans Zoom, pas gain créole haïtien, donc là, écrit français, on choisi ça qui dit French, français. Et donc, là, nous rentrons dans Zoom, tant pis, mettez-nous sous mute, muet, silence, pour nous capables pas gain trop d'interprétation. Et donc, nous souhaitons nous encore bienvenue et puis nous allons passer à l'événement Kounia là. Merci.
Thank you, Maria and Rose. We really appreciate that. At this time, I'm going to pass to Myra Pope, who's going to share a spoken word presentation with us.
Good evening, everybody. This poem is called Caged Blackbird. Now I rise as the phoenix escapes from me, through the fire, through the flame, leaving ashes underneath. I'm free at last, free from you, free from the past, freedom at last. What is life other than a cage to me? I'm free at last, free from you, free from the past, freedom at last. What is life other than a cage to me? Blackbird, oh blackbird, blackbird, sing one last song for me. Do you know why the caged blackbird sings? Maybe she was too afraid to fly, too afraid to reach for the sky, but never afraid to let her voice be heard. The words of freedom echo in her lungs, even though her wings have been clipped. she calls out for the glory of freedom. As the song leaves her lips, it becomes inspiration. See, the caged blackbird sings so that all the other ones can get inspired, motivated to sing again because they have been silenced. Silence for too long can become deadly, and it's time for us to sing. Let your voice ring. Ring in the ear of every politician who has never cared. Ring in the ear of all the other scared black caged birds. See, I know why the caged bird sings. She is the best thing that oppression has provided us. She is the strength that we find to keep moving on, the strength for us to finally sing. I guess the real question could be, why did they cage the bird at all? Afraid of her mighty wings, they clipped them. They put a blanket on the cage so it's always darkness, trying to make her feel worthless, like there is nobody on the other side of the cage and all her problems will never be erased. And her existence is pointless because she, like her fellow songbirds, have the gift of unapologetically speaking. And the cage master doesn't like that, but she can sense the presence of another broken bird, so she opens her mouth, fills her lungs, teaches them how to sing again, to not be afraid again, to know that through that darkness there is somebody, then she will not die in that cage in vain. Thank you. And next we will have Santra from the Miami Workers Center.
Good afternoon, bonsoir, buenas tardes, wataguan. My name is Santra Denis, and I am with the Miami Workers Center. And I'm super excited to be here with welcoming you all to Sounds of the Diaspora. We'll be discussing Florida's Black immigrants' needs and experiences, as well as solutions to our counties, our state's largest issues. South Florida is minority majority, where you can find café con leche, broiled fish and grits, grillo and digicole, all on one menu. You can find bachata, you can find compa, you can find reggae music, you can find Junkanoo Carnival, all at one festival or carnival. And that is why we celebrate the Black diaspora today. The Black diaspora is beautiful, and we're working to ensure that we have a county, state, and country that works for all of us. Get excited, because tonight is going to be a great time to celebrate all of you all beautiful people. Again, my name is Santra Denis, and I am the Interim Executive Director of Miami Workers Center. I am a native of South Florida, representing Broward County always in 954. I'm a first-generation Haitian American, and I'm excited to be living in this country, and that this country has afforded me so many things, and that I want to continue to tap into my country's, my family's country's, Haiti's activist spirit, to make sure that we continue to make this country great for all of us. I am an alum of the University of Florida, go Gators, and also have a master's from FIU. I'm president and founder of an organization called Avancer Ensemble, meaning moving forward together in the Haitian community. I mobilize, me and my board of directors, we mobilize Haitian American millennials to build economic and political power, specifically in the Broward community. I have over a decade of nonprofit experience managing, strategizing, and making sure that our communities have what's necessary for them to live and for them to thrive. I serve on many community boards, and I'm always willing and ready to make sure that our community's needs are met. Miami Workers Center is a strategy and action center. Our work is at the intersection of gender, race, and socioeconomic status. We fight for the most oppressed communities, and our campaigns have been around housing, domestic workers, do some work in climate change, as well as fighting for all issues that affect and impact Black and Brown communities. Again, welcome to this amazing evening, and I'm going to pass it over to Victoria with FAM.
Thank you very much, Sandra. My name is Victoria Villamil. I'm speaking on behalf of Marleine Bastien, who is the Executive Director of Family Action Network Movement, FAM. Unfortunately, Ms. Bastien was is dealing currently with a family emergency, so she sends her apologies for not being able to speak today. But if you have a question for her, please write it in the chat box. I will do my best to answer the questions. Obviously, I'm not as knowledgeable as Ms. Bastien, but I will do my best. And again, if you do have a question for her, she will get to it when she can. Just please write in the chat box and I will let her know. So thank you for this opportunity. Ms. Bastien, she's a licensed clinical social worker with undergraduate and graduate degrees from Miami-Dade Community College and Florida International University. And again, I mentioned she is the executive director and founder of FAM. FAM has provided an array of social services while organizing around issues like immigration, health access, education reform, gender equity, gentrification, climate justice, human rights, and housing. Ms. Bastien has dedicated herself to the betterment and benefit of others in health, education, economic survival, and economic justice. She is the former chair of the Florida Immigrant Coalition, FLIC, and the vice chair of the Haitian American Grassroots Coalition. For the course of around 30 years, she's worked on many important campaigns, including the Haitian Immigration Refugees Fairness Act of 1998, Temporary Protected Status, TPS, the DREAM Act, Comprehensive Immigration Reform, Living Wage, and Miami-Dade County's Human Rights Ordinance Education, and Children's Trust campaigns. She formed the Justice Coalition for the Haitian Children of Guantanamo. She's testified many times in front of the US Congress and the United Nations as well. She's a founding member of the Haitian American Grassroots Coalition, Haitian Neighborhood Central SANLA, the Center for Haitian Studies, Florida Immigrant Coalition, Girl Advocacy Project, and many other organizations. She's originally from Haiti. She's the mother of 3 wonderful boys, and she's an activist for all. So thank you. I will now pass it to Moné Holder of New Florida Majority.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Moné Holder. I am the Senior Program Director at New Florida Majority. I am a Rattler, a proud Rattler. I graduated from the Florida A&M University, receiving both my bachelor's and master's degree. I had the opportunity to get my feet wet in politics through my work in the legislature for over a decade. As serving at the New Florida Majority, I am a member of the senior leadership team, and I am based out of Jacksonville, Florida. I serve on various boards and committees here in Jacksonville and across the state, as my role is statewide, and I have my family based in South Florida. For those of you who do not know, New Florida Majority Education Fund is a racial justice organization. We're dedicated to creating an inclusive, just, and equitable Florida by building up the unified power of Black and Brown communities across the state. So I am honored to be on this panel. I will be talking to you a little bit later about voting rights and voter protection issues, which is one of my passions as part of my work. So thank you so much. And I will now pass it over to our next artist, Ms. Dina Edine.
What's up, y'all? It's your girl, Dina Edine. I'm here with the great artist, Sunshine. She'll be on the 1s and 2s, guitar style. Thank you so much, Black Immigrant Event, for having us. I'm performing a couple originals, and I'm really hoping you guys can vibe to it and just tap in with us right quick as we generate the vibes. You know what I'm saying? First track is called Jacuzzi, and yeah, here we go. You can run, you can hide, but we know the truth that's inside. We can make it relevant right now if you wanna talk about what you gotta hide. Feel it in my heart, in my soul. I know from beginning I was told what you need. There's a jacuzzi on my block. Babe, if you wanna make you a quick stop, oh, I can give you what you need. Give you what you need if you want to go there. By the way you breathe in and out, you long it, but you gotta make room, If you wanna go up and down this place, I already been on this road, baby, before. Ain't no repeat, baby, only company. Ooh, what you tryna do? I won't be rude. There's a jacuzzi on my block. Babe, if you wanna make you a quick stop, oh, I can give you what you need.
So sorry again for those technical difficulties. We're going to move forward. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the Black Futures Lab and their Black Census respondents. So if you all don't know about the Black Census Project, it is the largest survey of Black people conducted in the United States since Reconstruction. Over 30,000 Black people from across the country participated in this Black Census Project, providing their views, their political beliefs, their concerns, and their aspirations. And so I'm going to talk to you all a little bit about what was said. And for most of you all, these things will not be, they'll be similar to what your beliefs are. And so in terms of the folks that took the Black Census survey in 2015, took the Black Census, 2015 was born in the United States of America, 523 born in another country, and 471 from the Caribbean. 37% of the Florida sample were Black immigrants. And again, we're emphasizing Black immigrants because often Black immigrants are silenced. We don't necessarily get the representation that we need. And so we're going to talk specifically about what the Black immigrants have said in terms of what they're feeling, what their aspirations are, and what they want for themselves and for their future. And so here's what they said. And so You all see a few stats on this. 14% said that they didn't vote because they weren't interested or felt their voice wouldn't make a difference. And that's something that is huge for us to lift up, because this is an election year. Every year there are some kinds of elections, but we know that there are elections at the local, state, and federal level this year. And so we want to make sure that Black, specifically Floridians, feel as if that they can feel heard and their voices count when they vote. 13% said that they didn't vote because they didn't like the candidates or the issue. 49% said that they didn't believe politicians cared about Black people. 55% said that they didn't believe that politicians cared about immigrants. And then 80% of Florida respondents reported being registered to vote. And I think that's a huge number. If 80% of Florida respondents reported being registered to vote, we want to make sure that folks not only are registered, but that they have what they need, that they feel like when they vote, their voices are heard, as well as that the candidates also reflect what their viewpoints are. And so these are facts that, stats that we wanted to share with you all, and that we'll continue to think about these things as we figure out what are some of the solutions to some of these issues. Here's some more stats on what Black Floridian immigrants had to say. 87% favored increasing the minimum wage to $15 an hour. We know that you cannot live in Florida. You can't pay rent, you can't pay your utilities, you can't live a decent life if you don't at the least make $15 an hour. 96% favored providing affordable and quality health care for all Americans. And so Florida, again, we'll talk about it some more, is a state that did not expand Medicaid. And so you have Black immigrants, Black people in Florida saying that they want healthcare for all, while we're living in a state that did not expand Medicaid, that would have provided more healthcare to so many folks who needed it. 85% favored allowing formerly incarcerated people to vote. I'm going to shout out my colleague here, Moné, who I know the New Florida Majority did so much work around Amendment 4 in the state of Florida, and not only the New Florida Majority, but so many of their coalition partners moved, as well as Miami Worker Center, other folks were at the table to make sure that that they could not only educate people on the C3 side, but also ensure that folks understood what this process would be around Amendment 4. 84% said that low wages that are not enough to support family are a problem. And so we know we have a huge hospitality industry. We have a state that basically is run off of tourism. And so a majority of those hospitality industries pay minimum wage, or sometimes even under minimum wage, and folks cannot live on those types of wages. 71% said that killing of Black people by police officers is a problem. And for sure, this was taken before what we've been seeing in 2020, and for the last few, let's say, years, ever since Trayvon Martin, and before then, we know that the killing of Black folks continues to be a problem in this state, and this is something that Black people are very concerned about. 74% said that deportations of undocumented immigrants is a problem. We know that when folks are deported, that we split families up, that that most of the deportations that are happening are not because of illegal crimes or anything of that sort. So deportations is mainly frowned upon with Black folks, Black diaspora folks in the state. And so that was more information around the census, the Black Census Project. And I'm going to also basically change pages and go into income and healthcare, and that's what I'll be presented on today. Again, my name is Santra. I'm with the Miami Worker Center, and we do so much around income. We work with domestic workers, a lot of them who do not have access to any kind of benefits. And so income and healthcare is specifically really important to us because so many folks in our state go without. We know that, and we believe at the Miami Worker Center that we have a right to food, water, shelter, clothing, and adequate healthcare. And basically, we have a right to make sure that our basic needs are met, and the government should do everything that it in its possibilities to make sure all of their residents' needs are met. The Black Census data proves that Black Floridians do not have the things that we need. So we know that we know what we need, we know what we have a right to, and we also know that right now in Florida, we're not getting what we need. And I want to make sure that folks know that, you know, we make this democracy work, and that we have the power to make sure that our democracy works for us, that we have everything that we should have, and not just a few folks have it, but that we all have healthcare, that we all have housing, that we all have decent income to make sure that we can, you know, take care of ourselves and our families. These are things that we want to make sure that folks leave this webinar, this amazing event, knowing that we have the power to make this happen in our state. I also want to point to some additional stats that more than a third of renters are severely burdened in the state of Florida. They're spending more than half of their income on housing. And specifically, this has been something that Miami Worker Center is well known. This is something that the state of Florida is known for, specifically the Miami Worker Center, because we've been doing work with housing for over 2 decades. We know that the stock of housing in the state of Florida is not good. A lot of the housing that we have, there's mold, there's rodents, there's roaches. Landlords are not necessarily taking care of it, and they have the nerve to cost $1,000 for a studio apartment. We all know this well we know this, and we know that it is not only is it not fair, I believe it to be, and I think the Miami Worker Center as well believe it to be criminal. We know that 22% of respondents from the Census Project have reduced their meals or cut back on food to save money. You know, that is really sad for us to live in a state where people have to decide whether or not they have to eat or pay rent, right? And we don't want to put people in those kind of predicaments. 45% of respondents also said that they did not go see a doctor because of financial reasons. And we know even right now that when you have to make those decisions, you then come up even with more chronic diseases. So we know prevention costs less than when you really when you're really already sick, right? And so the more folks have to put off seeing a doctor because of money, we know that in the future, it will cost them 10 times, 20 times more because they didn't get the prevention that they needed. And again, those choices are not good. We don't want Floridians to be in a situation where they have to put off going to the doctor because their wages are not enough. I'm going to move to what's happening right now in terms of COVID. Since March 15, more than 2.5 million jobless applications have been filed in Florida. And over 2,600 evictions have been filed in Florida since April. And I'm sure those numbers have gone up even more. And so we know that folks have been without a job for over 3 months during this time. And majority of them are folks who look like us because we're overly represented in these industries that have been shut down in terms of cosmetology, in terms of hospitality, in terms of tourism. Black immigrants are overwhelmingly represented in these fields. We also know that folks have been filing applications to get unemployment in this state, and there's been like a royal mess up with what's happening with those unemployment applications. So we are truly in a state of emergency. We also know that federal dollars that have been sent to aid folks have not been sent to help everyone. We know that folks who are in a mixed status house, that they did not receive any kind of help from the government when we received the $1,200. And some folks didn't receive $1,200, some folks received less based on their income. But we know that there were groups of people who were not included, and these are also tax-paying people. And that is, again, criminal, and that should not happen. We should have folks who, elected officials at the federal level, who get it, who understands the makeup of our communities. And we too know that these immigrant mixed families, they work, they pay taxes, and that they didn't receive what was due to them at that moment. And so they too are in an even more desperate situation. And I want to also just go into Medicaid expansion really quick before we go to solutions. So it's not all bad, gloom and doom. We're going to bring it back and talk about solutions. Florida has not expanded Medicaid. And as you all know, if you have insurance, you can get COVID testing. Now there's a lot around paying for COVID testing. And so if you don't have wages, if you've been out of work, You don't have health insurance, you can't see a doctor. Now they want you to pay for testing. And so again, we see that many of our folks that we're talking about are often left out, and we're not receiving what we need to be prosperous and to thrive in this community. And I have news for you all. That, you know, I believe, and we believe at the Miami Worker Center, that we should challenge any of the practices or policies that continue to make us poor and to live sick and to die early. And so for sure, we want to continue to push at the state level for them to increase the minimum wage. And that's what we're educating folks about this year, that every time we vote, these are the things that we're voting for. To expand Medicaid, to ensure that folks who are sick and who can receive preventative care before they get sicker later. And that we can make sure that not only are we talking about physical health in terms of, you know, primary care, we're also talking about dental care, we're talking about mental health care, all of those that we need to make sure that we thrive. We want to make sure that that package is available for us. We also want to make sure that folks who have to go back to work and their children are at home right now, that they receive subsidies to make sure that they can go to work, but they can also afford childcare. There are many folks who are, you know, really concerned about what will they do as our state continues to open up. What will they do with their children, with after school programs being shut down? So folks need a subsidy to make sure that they can pay for childcare. I would be remiss if I didn't throw out the Domestic Workers Bill of Rights. People need benefits. You know, if folks are working, yes, they should have benefits, paid sick time, a paid day off, to make sure that when a crisis like this comes up, that folks are not, you know, 3 months without income, 3 months without benefits. And so many folks went uncovered in terms of healthcare because they only had employer-based healthcare. We want healthcare for all. And so these are some of the things that we want to propose to you as solutions when you're going to the ballot boxes, but also when you're advocating in your communities. These are the points that we want to leave with you. I have a few more. Here we go. And then we just want to make sure that in terms of PPE, masks, and all these things can become very costly for folks who are making low wages. And so making sure that masks, testing, being tested for COVID, that people who are working in people's homes, such as domestic workers, that they're provided all the precautionary or the preventative equipment necessary to make sure that they can keep themselves safe. Housing is extremely important. We believe housing is a human right, as well as healthcare, and we will continue to push to ensure that the communities that we work with, Black communities, brown communities, all the communities represented on this webinar today, we have everything that we need to thrive in this country, because the resources are so many, and we don't agree that a few should have all and a majority of us are left without. We believe that there's enough resources for all of us, and that's what we're fighting for. And so there's work for us to do. I want you all to keep fighting. Join the Miami Worker Center and the fights that we are doing to make sure that this government works for us. And that's all I had to share with you all. And I'm going to pass it to Victoria. Thank you all so much.
Hi, Santra. Thank you very much. Again, my name is Victoria. I'm the communications coordinator for FAM, Family Action Network Movement. I'm speaking on behalf of Marleine Bastien, who is unable to attend. But as I mentioned earlier, if you do have any question for her, please write it in the chat box, and I will give all the questions to her so she can go over them. I will do my best to answer any questions and explain to the best of my ability, but I wanted to give everyone the chance to ask her something directly. So again, please write that in the chat box. I'm going to try to speak slower because I know it's being interpreted. The topic I'm going to address is barriers to citizenship. So we're going to talk about the Black immigrant population in Florida, specifically Miami-Dade, and barriers to be a citizen, and also once immigrants become citizens, what sort of things that prevent them from really exercising their full rights. So a bit of a backdrop, Florida is home to obviously a large number of immigrants, many of whom hail from the Caribbean. So 1 in 5 residents actually was born in another country. Immigrants make up more than 1/4 of Florida's labor force. And some of these countries include the Bahamas, Cuba, Haiti, Jamaica, Trinidad, and Tobago. More than half of all these immigrants are naturalized US citizens. Specifically in Miami-Dade, it has the largest share of Black immigrants. 34% of the Black population in Miami are immigrants. And this is compared to around 28% in New York and around 15% in Washington. And then of those immigrants, more than 28,000, for example, native-born Jamaicans live in Miami-Dade County. Haitians account to around 70,000 residents. So that's nearly half of the Black population in Miami metro area. Being a citizen, I don't know if anyone has gone through this process. My husband's gone through this process. It's a very, very long and anxious process. It can take years. And when we're talking about immigrants in particular, especially we're talking about Haitians, you have to take into account the language barrier that exists. These applications are very complex, even for somebody who grew up speaking English. I know that I've gone through them and it takes a long time to really understand what they're asking. And they require answering questionnaires, submitting documents, passing a naturalization test. Immigrants have to prove they can read, they can write, they can speak English, and they also have to have a knowledge of US history. One thing too that we really need to emphasize is that legal services are very expensive. A lot of people think, oh, okay, well, maybe I can hire a lawyer and that person can help me with this, but they're very, very expensive. So many immigrants must go through this process alone, which is something that obviously makes it 10 times as hard. The application fees are also expensive. Typically the range is $725 to around $1,225 respectively. Obviously this is not a small feat. Again, to go back to the language barrier, the USCIS does not provide interpreters. So cases might have to be rescheduled if applicants don't have their own translator. And again, we mentioned how long the process can be. So if things are rescheduled and delayed, it just extends way more. And then this obviously contributes to applicants feeling powerless in the face of all these delays. So they're, it's obviously contributing to their mental health. They get anxious. They don't know if they're going to be able to stay in the country, etc. One thing too to note in terms of roadblocks that prevent immigrants from becoming US citizens, immigration laws currently require automatic deportation of even long-time lawful residents for very minor offenses, regardless of, like I said, how long they've lived here and also whether they have a citizen spouse or citizen-born children. Detention is also increasingly used as a strategy, and immigrants with no legal status who pose no threat to society, they're not violent, can sometimes be detained for a really long time, sometimes years. Obviously, if they're detained, it makes it difficult for them to fight their immigration cases. So again, contributes to the longevity of the process of becoming a citizen. Again, I want to stress that most immigrants held in detention have never been convicted of crimes. Nevertheless, immigrants in deportation proceedings, including asylum seekers, they're often held in very poor conditions that are identical or sometimes worse than conditions imposed on prisoners that are serving violent criminal offenses. So it's very disgusting. Once an immigrant becomes a US citizen, what prevents them from exercising their full rights? Again, to reiterate, especially in Miami, a lot of Black immigrants suffer from a lack of proper language access. They don't have sufficient knowledge of US labor laws, and that often makes them, vulnerable, and they can be commonly exploited by employers. One thing too that I want to emphasize is minority groups, especially Black immigrants, are more likely than other groups to use public transport. So, for example, on voting days, many of them do not have a car to get to the polls. It's also hard for them to get off time off work to go vote. Unfortunately, we don't have, I know in some countries, it's like a holiday to go vote, and we don't have that here. So it's hard for them to go vote. They're not aware of voting from home, which is something that FAM is really trying to push. And so they're not, many of them are not aware that they have this option. And so to go vote is, again, isn't right for everybody, is again, difficult. In terms of COVID, obviously the pandemic has contributed to a paralysis of immigration procedures, more anxiety with asylum seekers and permanent residents waiting American citizenship and others with pending cases. So this has just, made a really bad situation worse. If there are any questions, again, please type them in the chat box. I think I'm going to pass it over now to Farah from Florida Immigrant Coalition. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. My name is Farah Larrieux. I am the team lead for the Civic Engagement Campaign in Broward County for Florida Immigrant Coalition. And so my duty is to coordinate voter registration campaign around the county. So today we'll be talking about barrier to citizenship, ICE, how it plays to our community, and we'll be talking also about the GEO group and Florida contextual analysis. I want to take a moment to thank the organizers who did a wonderful job to put this event together. So let's talk about the Florida Immigrant Coalition. This organization was founded by a group of different members, different organizations who think that there's a need to represent the immigrant community. So Florida Immigrant Coalition is a statewide coalition with more than 65 members organization and over 100 allies, founded in 1998 and formally incorporated in 2004. So we are comprised of membership with different organizations, grassroots community organizations, farm workers, youth advocate, lawyers, union members, and much more. So our mission is to amplify the power of immigrant communities to impact the root causes of inequality, defending and protecting basic human rights, including the right to live without fear and the rights of immigrants. Our vision is to usher a new dawn, moving Florida in a more progressive direction by becoming an organization rooted in the history of struggles, incorporating leadership and of other oppressed people that can fully participate in a democracy where all can live freely, create, study, work, play, and love. And that's the purpose and the vision of Florida Immigrant Coalition. I have also to mention that I am a TPS recipient. I am from Haiti. So for me, working with Florida Immigrant Coalition, it's a passion, because it helped me to grow, to develop myself as an immigrant, but also helped me to be part of the solutions. So the first part of my presentation is about the barrier to citizenship. We at Florida Immigrant Coalition, we are a member of the National Partnership for New Americans. We serve about 10,000 legal permanent residents in South Florida since we launched the citizenship program in 2012. We serve close to 1,000 attendees every month with the citizenship drive that we have at the Lauderhill Mall in Broward County. And we have fully completed over 450 citizenship applications. I have to mention also that Florida New Americans has also engaged close to 100 volunteers from the communities that Flick serves, including law students, youth, and recently naturalized residents. And it's wonderful to see how we change people's lives and how they are happy when after they get their citizenship and they come back and volunteer with the coalition and for our citizenship drive. So what are the barriers of citizenship that we see now? So for the Immigrant Coalition and many others organizations around the country, we have did a case study where we have seen that over the last several years, USCIS leadership has pushed policies and practices that not only make naturalization and immigration benefits less accessible, but also mismanage the agency budget, which is mismanage our money, the taxpayers' money. These policy and practices have shifted USCIS from a customer service serving agency that is primarily focused on adjudicating applications toward an enforcement-heavy agency that is wasting resources and, again, our money as taxpayers. And what are these policies and practices? They extend citizenship application processing time to take longer to be able to get your citizenship, more burdensome for applicants, legal services provider, and even USCIS employees, more difficult for immigrants with disabilities, and actually my colleague and Farm just mentioned that. So it becomes more difficult for immigrants with disabilities to apply for citizenship. It required more complication, burdensome, and unnecessary documentation for those who are approved and waiting their swearing in ceremony. A bunch of nonsense, we will say another word. They also increased the insurance of notice to appeal, requests for evidence, and notices of intent to deny, which expand the circumstances in which USCIS official commence removal proceedings against applicants, and just very fast. And these applicants, they might be applying for benefits and for direct agencies official to deny also application for benefits instead of requesting additional information. We also see this policy, they also, part of this policy, they also decide to close international offices that process application. They participate in escalating the naturalization effort, and particularly with this administration, with the Trump administration, we see numbers of cases of denaturalization. They propose also to transfer funds from USCIS to Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE. They require in-person interviews for routine cases like those adjusting their status for permanent residency based on their employment and certain family members. So for certain family members who are seeking for reunite with asylees and refugees. What are the impact of that? So what we have seen is for the fiscal year 2020, the first quarter, ended in December 31st, 2019, there's a backlog of 652,431 applications, while the processing delay is currently now more than 8 months, which increased more than 3 months since the fiscal year 2016. Another impact is the processing time for all applications increased by 25% since the end of fiscal year 2017, and increased 101% since fiscal year 2014. Someone asked me to explain what is denaturalization. So denaturalization is the process where someone who have been get their American citizenship a couple years ago, now they start a process. Now you no longer, they stripped out your citizenship. You're no longer American citizen, and they put you in a position they can also deport you. And that's part of the policies that USCIS leadership is pushing these days. How is that even possible? Yes, there's law for that. They have not been enforced, but with the Trump administration, they're now enforcing the law. There's also cases where someone who have served in prison for a crime they have committed, they can also be deported, even they have been they've been raised in the United States, and they can also be deported because they have served their time here for a crime they have committed in the past. And we have seen cases, more people getting deported and more people being stripped out of their citizenship. I will at this point talk about ICE and also GEO group and the Florida contextual analysis. So in Florida, I don't know if you're aware, there's a law have been passed in 2019 called the Senate Bill 168. So the federal immigration enforcement prohibiting sanctuary policies requiring state entities, local governmental entities, and law enforcement agencies to use best effort to support the enforcement of federal immigration law. What does that mean? So with this bill, so it requires sheriff, police officers to act like immigration officers. So you get stopped for, let's say, a traffic offense, and you can be subject to be deported. So the impact of this law, because they ask all law enforcement agencies to work closely with ICE. So once someone, for any reason, they get arrested, so police officers can ask to check your immigration status. And if for some reason there was some complication in your immigration status, so you will be placed on hold in jail for a certain time until ICE officers will come and process you for deportation. So the impact of this is there's over 100,000 detainers issued in Florida to September 2019. They are detained in centers, right? Deportation centers for to be deported at some point. So top 5 counties issued detainers include Miami-Dade, Collier County, Leon, Palm Beach, and Broward County. We have also 141,393 total deportation from Florida since August 2018. And of these numbers, over 80,000 people have no conviction but were deported. The number one conviction that led to deportation in Florida is a traffic offense. Now, the case of ICE as an incarceration machine. So ICE has reported that only 30% of detainees has been tested for COVID-19. And of those tested, about 30% tested positive for the virus. So what ICE has been doing, they've been transferred between federal, state, and local jail detainees. And ICE facilities are currently accelerating the rapidly growing numbers of COVID-19 cases among the incarcerated population nationwide. And that's what makes us immigrants very fragile, because we are exposed to ICE. And it has been reported also ICE spreading, mistreating these detainees, and they are stripped out of their human rights. So we also have seen an increased numbers of deportation toward Haiti since the pandemic started. So in Haiti, we have seen a number, over 200 people have been deported. And even there's organizations like FAM, Florida Immigrant Coalition, they have been out and then denouncing this administration cruelty to deported people in a country where we know Haiti is already the condition of Haiti, and the health system is already broken. So instead of helping the situation, actually they are spreading out the COVID-19 not only within the detainees population, but also in fragile counties. And so we want to. There's simply is no safe way to deport people people at this moment. And deportation with the consequent spread of this highly contagious and deadly disease, so in receiving nation. And that is very bad. And we've seen people that the numbers of COVID-19 in Haiti also has increased. And these people, we don't know what's going on to them when they get deported in Haiti. So who's going to take charge of them if they have, and some of them, they have COVID-19. So if the US continue to facilitate deportation to Haiti, they want the impact of the pandemic for effectively perpetuate the cycle of migration to the United States. As Haitians desperate for work, security, and survival, they will be forced to leave Haiti and they will forced to come here. So that means ICE is also contributing to spread out COVID-19, not only in the United States, but also in other countries like Haiti. Next. And so Black immigrants are 3 times more likely to be detained and face deportation in the US. That's the numbers. And as of June 24th, 2,489 people in ICE custody have tested positive with COVID-19. 123 of these cases coming from the Broward Transitional Center, Glades County Detention Center, and the home ICE processing. Detention centers are particularly those ones by the private prison, corporation, GEO group, and core civic, and those contracted with local sheriff department. Let's talk now about GOE. And we mentioned GOE. What is it? GOE is a private institution profiting off the incarceration machine and separation families. They are based in Boca Raton, Florida, and publicly trade real estate investment trusts that invest in private prison in North America, Australia, South Africa, and the United Kingdom. They control about 77% of Florida private prison market. $33 billion in taxpayers' dollars are spent annually in private prison. And GEO Group is still making money off immigrants as they are detained during the pandemic. So I wanted to show you this graphic where you can see the cycle. You see how the private prison works. You have the mass incarceration, and the numbers of federal prison held in private prison was of 784% between 1990 and 2010. And 90% of immigrant detention center. And this costs the taxpayers. So they're making it costs $39 billion, and each person in prison, it costs $159 per day to taxpayers. And these companies, they're also making money in investment with the investment tax trust tax break in 2012. GEO Group had 1.69 billion in revenue in 2014. And you have investors like Wells Fargo, Fidelity, JP Morgan, Chase. They invest in this private prison. And they have also the political influence where they spend over $500,000 in political contribution and over $700,000 in lobbying. I'm gonna be fast. We want to talk about, okay, I want to talk about what FLIC does to elevate the immigrant and also educate them about their rights, because sometimes people think because they are undocumented, they don't have any rights. So when we put this flyer, we pass it to the community, and we have also a hotline that you can take a note of it. It's 1-800-888-600-5762. And we educate the community that if I show up at your door, you don't have to open the door, and you have to be prepared. So this is a list of information that we provide to the community. We also, we also have this information in 3 languages, English, French, English, Spanish, and Creole, where we have this information passed around the community. And so they know that they have a constitutional protection, which includes reserving their right to remain silent, to not sign anything, and to not share their country of origin. And we want to make sure that the community, and especially underserved community, they know that they have to get engaged in order to see solution. And that's why FLICA has this online, we used to be voter registration. We have investors on the street, and where we will make sure that in the community, we talk to them, we get them engaged. And can we please have success? Oh, sure, so definitely. We will have this information share with you guys, so you can have more, you can learn more about the Know Your Rights flyer. So talking about one of the things that we do in the community is to educate people about civic engagement. And because of the pandemic, we have transitioned to online voter registration campaign. And you can go to flick.vote, and you can see this. This is part of the website on the screen, and we have it again in English, Spanish, and Creole. And that's in this campaign is throughout 5 counties: Miami-Dade, Broward, Hillsborough, Volusia, and Alosha. And we hope that we can continue the conversation, make sure that either you are undocumented, you may not be able to vote. I have TPS and I cannot vote, but I can influence someone to vote and get out to vote and vote for candidates and politicians that will serve the aspiration of the people and help us to find solution. Thank you for your time. Florida Immigrant, FloridaImmigrant.org. This is the website, and you can visit us, and you can also get some of the documents that I share with you and Know Your Rights flyers as well. At this moment, I wanted to introduce the wonderful and talented The Whiskey Chick for a moment of entertainment. Have fun. Thank you for your time.
It's the Whiskey Chick. It's the Whiskey Chick.
Jazz là, ouais, bagarre compliqué, mais quoi changer la donne, fais pas
I get down when I want to kill him. Parle tout pour taille, met my mamelim. Il met la journée dehors, dépenser les vécables. Comme coûter, j'aime pas coûter. Qu'on en fait, non, non, non. Chérie, y'a même pas de problème. Des boubams, non, non, non.
Pas campé, ziggy ziggy zamba pas campé. Oui bon, pas la belle manchon, mais j'ai bon campé.
Y'a des femmes pas mal, mais il aime parler. Il dit parler, bébé parler. Capitaine n'importe ça son balai. La vie est belle, l'irède. Donc coûter, j'aime pas coûter. Qu'on en fait, non, non, non.
No, the audio did not go out again. Hello, everyone. It's me, Moné Holder with the New Florida Majority Education Fund. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about voting. New Florida Majority Education Fund, our programs work to increase the political voice and well-being of communities of color and build multiracial unity across the state through issue campaigns in the areas of democratic rights, criminal justice reform, economic justice, climate justice, gender justice, and immigrant justice. We believe that voting is the cornerstone of democracy. And I know each of us have our unique perspectives about voting, but what I think most of us can agree on is that our vote is our voice. And we've heard the phrase that voting is a fundamental right, and that's true. And in a perfect world, elections should be free, fair, and accessible, but we know that that is often not the case. Black and brown people are disproportionately impacted by voter suppression. Those are tactics that seek to deny access to the ballot box. We face barriers even before we get to the precinct locations. Some of those are voter purges. And what that means is it means exactly how it sounds. People who are registered to vote are purged or removed from the voter rolls. Now there's various reasons. Sometimes people pass away. Sometimes people have removed themselves. But oftentimes there are two issues that happen. Voters are deemed inactive and they remove them from the rolls without a voter even knowing. Maybe they changed location and didn't receive notification, and they do not know until they reach a precinct location that they are no longer registered. And oftentimes it's too late for them to get back on the rolls and cast the ballot. Another reason why voter purges happen is definitely a result of voter suppression. I remember many years ago, we had an instance here in Florida in which voters who simply had I guess immigrant sounding last names were removed from voting rolls because they were assumed to not be eligible to vote. And through our research and advocacy efforts, we realized that those were erroneous. So we also have to be careful and stay vigilant on making sure that we are active and we are registered to vote and on the voting rolls, especially when we get closer to election times. Another instance of voter suppression I'll mention is precinct locations closing. Now, in Florida, we have 67 counties, and each county has their own supervisor of elections who typically control the amount of early voting days and times for their precinct, and they monitor all of the administrative duties of how elections are ran in their county, one of which is the assignment of precinct locations during early voting period and on election day. Our supervisors of elections in each county also have a budget. If and when there is a budget cut, supervisors of elections have to make changes in the amount of early voting locations that they have in a particular area. Oftentimes, the first areas that are cut are those in communities of color. Another instance of voter suppression when it comes to precinct locations closing is that we're often not notified. So maybe a location in which you voted the last election cycle, or you have been voting for many, many years, has all of a sudden closed down. And for many of our folks in our communities, we take time during our lunch break, maybe before we're headed to work, in between picking up our children, to go cast our ballot. And if and when we realize that our familiar precinct location is not there, that often deters us from actually casting our ballot. A few other things I'll mention as some common voter suppression tactics are definitely around strict ID laws. So the types of identification that is permissible in order for you to actually cast your ballot. And one other one that has come up most recently is around poll tax. My colleague Santra mentioned Amendment 4 and the restoration of voting rights to returning citizens, which was a huge campaign that almost every voter in the state of Florida favorably voted yes for. However, I know how many of you have seen in the news, there's been a lot of back and forth around fines and fees. And pretty much that prohibits some people who aren't financially able to be able to cast their ballot. So I can go on and on about different voter suppression tactics, but we also want to just be vigilant and be aware of what those are. The bright side is that each and every one of us can play a role in being advocates for access to the ballot, and each and every one of us can participate in voter protection. A few ways we can do that is through advocacy. So I know we've all heard of election laws that come up in our state legislature. So oftentimes there are different organizations that come up with some proactive measures to try to make sure that voting is, accessible to all communities. But we also have to be on defense. So there may be things that come up either at the local level or the state level that may impact the way in which we can vote. So we want to make sure that we stay on top of those things and advocate for our communities, either through calling our elected officials directly or informing our communities about what's to come. Another one is legal action. And I'll talk a little bit about that. So one instance in the past was during hurricane season, and we are entering or in hurricane season right now. And there is a cutoff in which people can register to vote for an upcoming election. And during a time that a hurricane hit a few days before the book closing for voter registration, which we know deeply impacted people's availability, not only to be out in the field to register to vote, but also to have, Wi-Fi access online. We would hope that, due to the circumstances, there would be an extension to voter registration to allow people not only to make sure that their homes and their communities were safe, but to also be able to register or even update their voter registration information so they can cast their ballot. However, that wasn't the case. So New Florida Majority and several other organizations around the state and legal organizations as well pulled together to take legal action and demand that the state extend voter registration during a period that allowed us to be able to get as many people as possible registered to vote, and we won. Another instance is something that's happening right now. As we are in the middle of COVID-19, earlier this year, we had what we called a presidential preference primary. And it was smack dab in the middle of us moving into quarantine phase. So not only were people worried about their health and their well-being and stocking up on essential items, but it was also a lot of fear for being healthy. We also know that a lot of precinct locations were not able to stay open because they were located at either facilities that had senior populations, and we know they're more susceptible to COVID-19, and that caused a huge impact on voter turnout. So as we head into our state primary in August and into our general election in November, we have a great deal of concern of how COVID-19 will impact not only turnout, but the health of poll workers, poll monitors, and people who are going to cast a ballot. So New Florida Majority, along with a few other groups, are doing some legal action again to try to ensure that we have access to the polls even during current COVID-19. So that means we're asking for the state to expand early voting days and hours, as well as locations. We're asking for more time to allow voters to what we call cure their vote by mail. So vote by mail is definitely an option. You can fill out your ballot in the comfort of your home, send it back to your supervisors of election office and have your vote counted. However, there are different things that you need to complete, such as a signature. Your signature must match, and we want to make sure that if there are any discrepancies with people's ballots that vote by mail, that they have enough time to fix it so that their vote can be counted. We're also asking for vote by mail counting deadlines and receipts. So we want to make sure that people who send in a vote by mail ballot that's postmarked on election day is still counted, because currently it is not. We want to ask that all Floridians who are registered to vote automatically receive a vote by mail ballot. Right now you have to request one. If you don't request one, then it is assumed that you will vote in person. Also asking for vote by mail drop boxes. So as I mentioned earlier, safety is a big concern. So if and when you have a vote by mail ballot that you filled out at home and maybe you haven't gotten a chance to put a postage on it and get it into the mailbox before election day, you can actually physically drive there and drop it off. And also just expanding language access. So making sure that instructions and sample ballots are in multiple languages. So these are things that we are asking for currently in the courts, because they're not available to us, and we want to make sure that each and every voter in the state of Florida has access despite being in the middle of a pandemic. In addition to legal action, you can also volunteer as a nonpartisan election protection advocate at polling locations. That means going to a training that's hosted by several organizations around the state, including New Florida Majority, that teaches you everything that you need to know about elections, election protection, and allows you to help voters in real time. So if someone comes out of a precinct location and they've had a problem, they're at the wrong location, they don't have the correct ID, they may say, they told me to cast a provisional ballot. I don't know what that means. I wasn't able to read, the ballot is in a different language. You would be trained to know how to help them, both in answering their questions, being a liaison between them and the supervisor of elections office, and even documenting any instances in case legal action needs to happen later on. And to be a election protection advocate, you can actually find out more information about when those trainings are occurring on our website, which is newfloridamajority.org. Last but not least, I want to talk a little bit about what we call ballot chasing. Most organizations do that in our community, so we know that we have our members or leaders of our communities who voted by mail. We help them to track whether or not their ballot actually made it in and whether or not it was counted. But you can also do that yourself. you can go on your local supervisor of elections website, type in the information that they ask you, and you're able to see or track the process of your ballot. And if there is an issue, you can contact your supervisor of elections to cure it or figure that out prior to election day. And you can also share that information with members of your community. So some important dates, which were on the last slide. So we have our primary election on August 18th, 2020. So that is where you will see on your ballot candidates that are up for election. And it also depends on where you are. Maybe for your city council, your city commissioner seats, you'll see people in your state house of representative, congressional districts, judicial districts. So there may be people running for county judge. You will see those on your ballot. So the day to vote for those is August 18th, 2020. The last day to register to vote for this primary in August is July 2nd. Now you can register to vote after that, but you won't be eligible to vote in the August primary election, and that's very important. As far as early voting periods is concerned, the mandatory early voting period for the primary election is August 8th through the 15th. And as I mentioned, the supervisor of elections for your county has some discretionary power about either extending that period or not. So be sure to definitely check in your county to make sure you know the exact dates. For the general election is November 3rd, 2020. The last day to register to vote for the November election is October 5th, 2020, and the early voting period is from October 24th to the 31st. And lastly, I want to encourage you all to make a plan to vote. So I know I talked about early voting, I talked about election day, I talked about voting by mail, so it's a lot. So we want to plan it out before we get close to election day so we know exactly what we want to do. You can actually visit www.newmajority.vote, and I think we'll either put that in the chat or it'll definitely be emailed out to you. And once you go to that website, it'll either ask you if you want to vote by mail, and if you haven't, it will direct you to your supervisor of elections office so you can request a vote by mail ballot right then and there. You can plan to vote in person, and you can put in your address, and you can see where your current precinct is and where early voting locations are in your county, so you can pick the one that's best for you. So I encourage you all to decide whether you're going to vote by mail, whether you're going to vote in person. If you're still not sure, you can still request a vote by mail ballot, and if you change your mind, you can turn it in and have a regular ballot counted. But the important part is to make a plan and to definitely make sure you turn out to vote and tell your friends. All of this information here, you can definitely find on our website, and you can also make your plan to vote on www.newmajority.vote. So now I believe we will move into our Q&A section. So you can definitely ask questions directed to me, but to any of the panelists that you heard from this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Moné. Good evening, everybody. My name is Brittany Farrell. I am an organizer and policy associate at Black Futures Lab. I want to thank all of you who tuned in and joined us this evening as we talk about some of these very important issues and solutions for Black Floridians across the African diaspora. So we're going to get into some Q&A. If you see there is a button for Q&A, you can drop a question in that box, or you can put it in the chat. So I'm going to start with a question that came through earlier. I'm just going to throw it to the panel, to whomever would like to speak to it. We had a question come through that says, why can't we build businesses that allow worker visas for immigrants and give an incentive for businesses who hire Afro immigrants? So if anyone on the panel wants to take a stab at that question, it is up for grabs. All right. One more time. Why can't we build businesses that allow worker visas for immigrants and gives incentives for businesses who hire Afro immigrants.
I can try to take that one. This is Santra with the Miami Worker Center. Although we don't necessarily do immigration work, I think there's been Flick who's definitely led the way in immigration work. And I think it's perhaps not that we can't, it's that why don't we have the political will to do so? I think everything is possible. I think whether or not we have the political will in this country to move forward on some of the what will be some alternatives or some different opportunities for immigrants to become naturalized. And I'll pause there and see if Flick or Fam has any thoughts about that as well.
Thank you, Santra.
Hi, this is Victoria. I would agree with Santra. It's not so much that I would say that we would need people in power to agree to that. And which is again, why voting is so important, as Moné mentioned earlier. But I wish that was the case. I wish we could do that, and we can, but we just, like Santra mentioned, would need the political power.
Thank you, Victoria. We're going to move on to the next question. We had a question come through the chat when Moné was speaking about voting, and it says, let's see here. What is the best way to protect people who vote by mail? As they said, it's not the safest. They prefer to go to the polls.
Sure thing. So I advise if you are planning to vote by mail, to request your vote by mail ballot, get it turned in as early as possible so you can definitely take advantage of tracking your ballot and giving you enough time that if you feel like it's taking longer than usual, or if they do raise a problem with your ballot, you have enough time to cure it or fix it, or go into your supervisors of elections office to find out what it is that you need to do. That is the only sure-proof way. And you can check that online on your Supervisor of Elections website, and you can go on periodically, or you can call your SOE's office directly to find out more information. But that is the best way.
Thank you, Moné. We have about 4 more minutes now of Q&A. So we have 2 more questions that just came through. This one says, we are supporting the Battleground State handwritten postcard Get Out the Vote initiative for fall 2020, which includes Florida. Do you have an opinion on the effectiveness of campaigns like this? Does anyone want to take a jab at this one? I can repeat that. We are supporting the Battleground State handwritten postcard Get Out the Vote initiative for fall 2020, which includes Florida. Do you have an opinion on the effectiveness of campaigns like this?
I think I can answer that one. It's Moné, New Florida Majority. I think all efforts that encourage voters to get out the vote and exercise their voice by casting a ballot is important. There are always what we call trusted messengers in different communities. So I may tell someone to turn out to the polls, to get out to vote, and it doesn't resonate as well as someone else does. So I think at every point that we can talk to voters in our community, expressing the importance of voting, especially this year during this election cycle, is extremely important. So in my opinion, the more we get the message out, the better.
Thanks, Moné. I agree. This is Kiana, Political Director with Black Futures Lab. I just wanted to jump in quickly and thank you for being involved. We can never get started too early, so we appreciate all of your efforts. You know, if you had asked me pre-COVID-19 whether I thought handwritten postcards were the best way to spend your time, I might have given you a different response. But I think we are finding ourselves in a completely new landscape, And I really think that everything has to be on the table. And I think handwritten postcards are one of those. I think that a lot of campaigns and political activists are going to be going back to the drawing board to think about methods in the past that maybe were effective, maybe weren't, and giving them another serious look. And I do believe that postcards are going to be a part of that. So thank you for all you're doing.
Thank you for that, Kian. We have 2 more minutes for Q&A, and this question that just came in says, where in Broward County is voter participation the lowest and need is the greatest?
This is Farah. I can answer that. It's in Lauderhill, Lauderdale Lakes, Pompano Beach, and Myanmar are some of the cities that where we see a lower participation, and also the city of West Park. That's among the cities that we see low participation.
I would add to that, this is Santra with Miami Workers Center, that you also see where there's also voter, low turnout in terms of voters, you also see low response rates for census. And so a lot of the organizations who are on the call are also engaging in census work, and that's where that folks are really trying to double down to make sure that folks are responding not only to the census, but they're registering to vote and that they get out to the ballot. And I know Moné so beautifully spoke about so much of the tactics around voter suppression. And so there's so much work to be done in those communities because, again, those communities that Farah just listed are heavily Black and brown, huge immigrant populations in Lauderdale Lakes, Myanmar. And so there's just work to be done and making sure that they're not getting information that's just not correct.
Thank you, Santra. Okay, so that's all the time we have for Q&A. Before I pass it off, I do want to let you all know that at the end of this session, we are going to have another jam session with the Whiskey Chicks. So stick around if you liked that earlier. We are going to pass it off to Carlton, one of our organizers with a New Florida majority. Carlton, it's on you.
Hey, everyone. Yeah, so I just wanted to make sure that as we are finishing up our night, I'm so thankful that everyone has been able to join us. I just want to remind you, if you have not already, please go online to newfm.win/Black Agenda, so that way you can sign on to the agenda, you can hear more about what the Black Futures Lab is doing, and you can become a part of this movement that we're working on to make sure that Black policy issues are raised to the level of importance that we need them to. Also, if you are interested in checking your registration for voting by mail, you can go to this website that we've listed here. You can also go to newmajority.vote, as Moné had mentioned earlier. That's also a great resource. Yeah, and so these are some resources that we have mentioned over the night. Again, if you have not taken the time, though, it takes about 20 seconds to go onto this website and show your support for this agenda, show politicians how important it is to us that these issues are looked at constantly, and making sure that we look at how important race is in making these policies to support our communities. And then also, if you would like, I really encourage you also to find us online. Here we have listed all of our lovely websites and our social media. So whichever platform you find yourself on most for social media, you can find us on Twitter, on Facebook, or on Instagram. And of course, we have our main websites where you can find out all about what we're doing and how you can get involved locally. I also just want to just thank every single organization that has come on to this call to help educate us tonight and bring us together as a community. I think it's been a wonderful time. I've learned so much, and I'm so grateful to be working with all these organizations. So shout out to FAWN, to Florida Immigrant Coalition, to the Miami Workers Center, to New Florida Majority's Education Fund, and mostly to Black Futures Lab for putting this whole agenda together and making sure that our community's voice is heard. the many voices within our communities are heard. And also, I would like to thank Marb Language Services for helping to translate today. It's so important to our organization that everyone in Florida has access to our content, has access to our movement. And so we are really glad that you can join us today, no matter if you're speaking Creole, Spanish, or English. So thank you all again. And shout out to our wonderful artist, Dina Adine, and the Whiskey Chick for providing us with such nice sounds as we've been going through this kind of, hard material. It's been really helpful, I think, to hear some of the really amazing and uplifting music that some of Florida's own Black immigrant artists have been working on. So thank you again so much to everyone who has come out to join us today, to show support for the community and to continue learning and educating and being an increasingly important part of this movement that we are all working on together. So thank you so much. And we're gonna close out the night with a lovely performance from the Whiskey Chick. I think she needs no introduction. But yeah, I think that it's been a wonderful, lovely night, and thank you all again.
Qui ça pour me dire, pour me faire comprendre que la vie a pas si facile. Fon chita pour ka wè clair côté ou vle. On décide sur ça on pral faire. Ou vieux tout bien dans femme si là. Oublier tout ça papa ou maman te parler. Maman petit temps pour m'expliquer. Sans faire envie ça c'est lui ouais. Un prix frais, réfléchis bien pour pas perdre l'idée. Ouais ben, attention à ton cela. Oh ouais ben, oh, dis-moi sans passer beaucoup. Ouais ben, fais attention à ton cela. Mon compère moi. L'éternel.
It's the Whiskey Chick.
Nous gen musique pour chill. Nous pas besoin de pilule. Faut que nous pas trop pressé. Nous pas besoin de stresser.
Ce soir, on va faire la fête.
Chill time, please. Gardez qui j'aime, moi relax. C'est comme ça, moi fait n'a besoin de compresser. Gardez qui j'aime, moi relax. Fais ta fiamme absolue tellement bien glacée. Gardez qui j'aime, moi relax. A fait me relax, pas de problème que propose. Gardez qui j'aime, moi relax. M'a donne jazz à déposer. La vie est difficile. Fon prend bagay yo tranquille. Nous gen musique pour chill. Nous pas besoin de pilule. Faites la balle commencer. C'est ça moun yo t'a demandé. Fanatique rassemblé. Maintenant les cap séparés. Nous lever, nous lever, nous lever, nous lever, nous lever, nous lever.
It's the whiskey chick.
Jouis la vie, jouis la vie, jouis la vie. Oui. C'est un cap passé, c'est l'âge qu'a rentré, jouis la vie. C'est un cap passé, c'est l'âge qu'a rentré, jouis la vie. Jouis la vie. Jouis la vie, jouis la vie. Jouis la vie, jouis la vie, jouis la vie. Ah, ah, ah. C'est un cap passé, c'est l'âge qu'a rentré, jouis la vie. C'est un cap passé, c'est l'âge qu'a rentré, jouis la vie. Loulou, c'est la même bouillon.
It's the whiskey chick.
Pour me faire comprendre que la vie n'est pas si facile. Font chita pour qu'à ouais clair côté ou fléral. On décide sur ça on va le faire. Ou vient tout pour une femme si là. oublié tout ça papa ou maman te parlé.
It's the whiskey chick.
Te gen a pou portant yon chef seksyon ki te paret ak lot sécurité après mal tribunal tande sa juge la te di mwen oh la rose ça passe comme ça bon mwen non juge pas comme mwen non. Allo Lembe avec Wekre Martin bonsoir au cap moins ta bralé mes amis contrariés m'impliqué dans yon accident des gars pour content yon chef section qui te paraît ak l'autre sécurité après ma tribunal, dans des juges la te di mwen, oh 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 oh. Mes familles moun yo la, avec yo pou parler, gade jan y a prié.
Thank you all again for attending. Have a great evening.
Thank you.